Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Smooth Brain EDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. We've got a really exciting competitive game for you today, and all four of the decks today can win off of some really quick combos. So, let's jump right in and see who's playing what. Today our combatants are Corey, Cody, Chandler, and Ethan. I like to call it 3 C's and an E. And up first is Corey and his Krenko deck. Now, when we first seeded up for this game, Corey claimed that his is just a simple creature deck among a sea of blue decks. And while that's technically true, it can go wide with Krenko's activated ability. His main goal is to assemble the Kiki Jiki Conspicuous Snoop combo. With the Snoop out and Kiki Jiki on the top of his library, he can make infinite Snoops. And then with Goblin Sharpshooter and a sack outlet, he can infinitely ping everyone. Up next is a returning personal favorite of mine, Cody's Urza deck. This deck is actually really cool. It's a control/combo style deck that relies on the Tidespout Tyrant combo. With this combo, all you need is Tidespout Tyrant and 2 mana positive artifacts. You get to keep playing, bouncing, and tapping them for mana, getting you infinite mana. But with Urza out, any 0-drop artifact is mana positive. And with his 5 mana ability, you get to cast your entire deck once you get infinite mana. And would you believe me if I told you the mono blue deck plays a buttload of counterspells? Alright, and up next is Chandler and his Chulane deck. And I am aware it is pronounced Chulane, but I prefer to say Chulane. This here is a food chain deck. The game plan of this deck is to get food chain on the table and a creature you can cast from exile. This will generate you infinite mana, and then you cast Chulane. With Chulane out, you draw a card every time you cast a creature from exile. And then you keep drawing until you find your win con, which is usually either Walking Ballista or Finale of Devastation. And if all else fails, it's also got Thassa's Oracle. And last but not least is Ethan barring Cameron's Selvala deck. He can win by several different means. He can make infinite mana with Selvala by having a big enough creature out and Staff of Domination. Or he could simply win with combat damage. He can even win by casting a giant Finale of Devastation. Alright, I think we've heard enough about these decks so far. Let's look and see what their starting hands are. And first up is Corey. His starting hand consists of 2 Mountains, a Bloodstained Mire, Lightning Greaves, Dockside Extortionist, Goblin King, and Stranglehold. This is a pretty solid hand. It's not too fast, but Dockside Extortionist can allow it to catch up to anyone going too fast. And Stranglehold is a really good piece to have against his opponents. Up next is Cody. He keeps the Gemstone Caverns, Jeweled Lotus, Mox Amber, Sapphire Medallion, Static Orb, Intuition, and a Force of Negation. At first glance, this hand doesn't seem too good, but because he's able to get out Urza, turn 1 with Jeweled Lotus, Mox Amber, Sapphire Medallion, Static Orb, all those pieces now become blue mana, so it's not bad. Up next is Chandler, who has a starting hand of Temple Garden, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Mox Diamond, Birds of Paradise, Freed from the Real, and Pact of Negation. This hand has blazing fast mana, and if Chandler's draws are good, it could potentially win him the game very quickly. But if not, Corey's Dockside Extortionist is looking even better. And finally, Ethan keeps a hand of 3 Forests, Mox Diamond, Galta, Phyrexian Dreadnought, and Beast Within. This hand is honestly everything you need. Lands, turn 2 Selvala, and because of Phyrexian Dreadnought, he'll be able to land a turn 3 Galta. Alright, we've seen the hands. Let's jump straight into the game. Chandler wins the die roll, but Cody decides to put in his Gemstone Caverns, exiling his Sapphire Medallion before he starts his turn. And so Chandler starts his turn off with a Forest, tapping it to cast Soul Ring, and then tapping that to cast Arcane Signet. He then casts Mox Diamond.
Okay, hold up, I don't like that.
It resolves and he pitches Temple Garden. And then finally, he taps Mox Diamond to cast Birds of Paradise. With 6 mana at his disposal next turn, he passes to Corey. Corey plays a Bloodstained Mire and passes to Cody. Corey decides to fetch on Cody's draw step, and then Cody starts his turn off with an Urza's Bauble, into Mox Amber, into Jeweled Lotus. He then cracks the Jeweled Lotus for 3 and casts Urza, tapping his Gemstone Caverns. But then tragedy strikes. Chandler Pact of Negations Urza, and because it's Cody's turn, he can't Force of Negation in response. With pretty much all his hopes and dreams shattered, Cody decides to Urza's Bauble Ethan. Cody looks at a random card from his hand, which I'm pretty sure after the game he said was a Forest. Cody then passes to Ethan and draws a card on his upkeep. And on his turn, Ethan plays a Forest, then Mox Diamond, pitching a Forest, and then passes to Chandler. And on his turn, Chandler pays for the Pact and passes to Corey. And on Corey's turn, he fetches with Wooded Foothills for another mountain, and then casts Lightning Greaves before passing to Cody. Cody plays a Mishra's Bauble on his turn, and then passes to Ethan. Ethan plays a Forest, and then drops a turn 2 Selvala, and passes to Chandler. With not much else to do, Chandler casts Chulane. He then taps his last mana and casts Sylvan Tutor. But Cody will have his revenge and Swan Songs it. Chandler gets his 2/2 bird, then passes to Corey. Corey plays his third mountain, and then casts Dockside Extortionist. Cody decides to not crack his bauble yet, and Corey gets 6 treasure tokens. Corey uses 3 of his treasures and his last land to cast Stranglehold. In response, Cody cracks his bauble to look at the top of Chandler's deck. Corey then Infernal Plunges his Dockside Extortionist, making 3 red mana. Then uses it and 1 more treasure to cast Krenko. He then equips the boots and passes to Cody. Even with the extra bauble card, Cody can't do anything, so he passes to Ethan. Ethan plays a Forest and then casts Phyrexian Dreadnought. He draws a card thanks to Selvala, and before the Phyrexian Dreadnought sacrifices itself, he floats 12 mana with Selvala. He then casts the card he drew, which is Mana Crypt. He then casts Galta and still has 4 green floating. This triggers Selvala and he draws a card. Ethan then casts Staff of Domination, to which Cody, Force of Negations, pitching Intuition. Ethan then casts Carpet of Flowers, but with no islands on the field, he just passes to Chandler. Chandler taps his Soul Ring to cast and activate Sensei's Divining Top, looking at the top 3 of his library and putting them back in any order. Chandler then moves to combat, swinging his Goose at Cody and Chulane at Corey. After that, he passes turn. Corey activates Krenko on his end step, making 1 Goblin token. And on his turn, he plays a mountain. Then casts Goblin King, and then passes to Cody. Cody casts a Lotus Petal and then passes to Ethan. Ethan starts his turn off by winning his Crypt trigger, and then taps for 2 to cast Collector Roof. In response, Chandler activates Top to draw a card, putting Top to the top. He then taps for 3 and flashes in Hull Breacher. Chulane triggers, and he redraws the top. Ethan then moves to combat and swings 12 at Chandler, who takes it. He then passes to Chandler after that. Chandler casts a Chrome Mox, declining the imprint trigger, then swings the Goose at Cody again, recasts Sensei's Divining Top, and then passes to Corey, who activates Krenko on instep again. Corey plays another mountain, then casts Jessica's Will, choosing both modes. He exiles Jeweled Lotus, Goblin Matron, and Goblin Welder. He casts the Jeweled Lotus and Goblin Matron from exile. He then searches and finds Goblin Recruiter to his hand thanks to Goblin Matron's ability. Corey takes a little while to decide what he's going to do next, so everyone plays rock, paper, scissors while he thinks. And so Corey decides to cast the Recruiter, puts his combo on the top of his deck, and while he searches, he passes to Cody. And for those of you wondering, he tells us that he puts Snoop on the top, followed by Kiki Jiki, Muxus, Skirk Prospector, and Goblin Sharpshooter. On Cody's turn, he finally manages to play a snow-covered island, and so he taps for 2 and casts Torpor Orb, hoping it'll slow Corey down some. And so he passes to Ethan, but on his end step, Ethan Beast Within's Chandler's Hull Breacher. Ethan wins his Crypt trigger again, then casts Wild Growth on a Forest. He then moves to combat, swinging 12 more at Chandler, who takes it. And then he passes to Chandler. And so Chandler plays an island as his land for turn, and then moves to combat, swinging 2 at Cody and 3 at Ethan. And with only 3 mana thanks to the Collector Roof, he passes to Corey. And Corey activates Krenko on instep. And on his turn, Corey plays a mountain, taps for 2, and casts his Snoop. He reveals Kiki Jiki at the top of his library. Who could have seen that? Unable to give his Snoop haste because of Ethan's Collector Roof, he passes to Cody. And on his turn, Cody casts Soul Ring before passing to Ethan. And on his turn, Ethan loses his Crypt trigger. And on his first main phase, he makes it green thanks to Carpet of Flowers. And so Ethan activates Selvala, making 12 mana, and then floats 4 more, totaling to 16, and casts Finale of Devastation, X is equal to 14, and grabs Phyrexian Dreadnought out of the graveyard. And thanks to Cody's Torpor Orb, it doesn't have to sacrifice itself. And so, Ethan swings for 68 at Corey. And lucky for Corey, Chandler reminds everyone that Finale of Devastation only gives haste, not trample, so he can just chump block the oof. And so before blocks, Corey activates Krenko, making 17 more goblins. And thanks to the Goblin King, they're all 2/2s. And I will add, we did accidentally make 2 more goblins than we were supposed to, but it doesn't make a difference in the long run. And so, through the power of an army of 2/2 goblins, he puts enough under Galta and the Phyrexian Dreadnought to kill them, and 1 underneath the oof to make it out without losing any life. And so, unfortunately, with his efforts in vain, Ethan passes to Chandler. Chandler just moves straight to combat on his turn, swinging 2 at Cody and 3 at Ethan. Chandler then just passes to Corey. And on his upkeep, now that Snoop isn't held back by summoning sickness, Corey makes infinite tap Snoops, and then draws Kiki Jiki. Corey then reveals Muxus on the top of his library. And since Snoop lets you cast off the top of your library, that's exactly what Corey does. And with Muxus's ETB trigger, he puts Goblin Sharpshooter, Skirk Prospector, and Goblin Warchief onto the battlefield. I forgot to mention the Goblin Warchief earlier, my bad. And now he has his combo on board. He can tap Sharpshooter to deal a damage to anyone, and then sacrifice one of his infinite Snoops to get a red mana and untap the Sharpshooter. And with that, the game is over. Congratulations, Corey! And shout out to his brother Sam in the comments. Alright you guys, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I will say, the writing was on the wall for a little while that Corey was probably going to win that game, but the blue decks went so fast and fizzled out really early, so they weren't able to counter anything late game. So that left Ethan to try to handle Corey, but the Goblin army was too much for him to handle. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to comment, we love hearing feedback from you guys. Also, be sure to follow us on our social media pages. We post a lot of sneak peeks and behind the scenes there, so come give us a follow, links will be in the description. Also, if you're willing, please consider supporting us on Ko-fi. Anything helps, the link for that will also be in the description. But once again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you next video. Have a smooth day.